In part 1 of the tutorial, we put together our signatures, our pages, and now we're ready to sew them together. The style that I use is called Kettle Stitch. It's a very basic stitch for binding books, and it looks like this. It makes these lines all up and down the spine, and this is the part that I leave uncovered because I think it's pretty. It's a pretty strong stitch. Sometimes it does leave gaps. I don't know if you can see the gaps here, but it doesn't affect the function of the book. In fact, I actually kind of like the gaps because it makes it so that the book can lay perfectly flat on a surface instead of curving over, because there's no spine binding holding it together. So I prefer this. That's why I keep doing it like this. All right, for the binding part, you just need your signatures that you've made and some basic sewing material. You need a needle and you need some thread. Sewing the first signature is really just basic sewing. You're going in and out, and then you go back up. This is a great little exercise for kids. It's a wonderful fine motor practice, especially you could use a darning needle. Make sure your holes are a little bit bigger. A darning needle and some embroidery thread, and they can make a lovely little booklet for themselves. It's a great beginner sewing lesson. So I have 13 holes in my signatures. If I begin on the inside going out, by the time I come back up, I will also be going back out, and that's important because you want to be on the outside when you're connecting your next signature. So I begin on the inside going out. I put my needle here from the inside, and then I go to the outside of the spine. You're drawing from the inside and going to the outside through the hole and pulling tight. So your knot will be here on the inside here. And if you don't want to pull too tight because it will, inevitably it will pop through. So you want to keep it a little loose on that first tug. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to go back through the next hole to the inside. And you're going to pull, being mindful not to get tangled. So we have a little line there, and this is what the inside looks like. Again, we're going to go through this next hole to the outside. And again, through here. And you're going to do this all the way down the spine. This is the part of bookbinding that I really enjoy. And when you've reached the end, you're going to go right back up the other direction. This is what you're looking like. You're going to go right through this hole now, and you're going to fill in all those blank spaces. Oops. Filling in so that it will be a line instead of spaces, dashes. So when you finish that, you'll have a pretty solid line here and a solid line here on the spine as well. And you're ready to join your second signature to this. You've come out onto the outside of the spine. You take your second signature and you make sure that the holes are meeting up pretty perfectly. And I tuck my thumb in here to kind of hold it inside the fold. And you're going to draw your needle down through this top hole to the inside of the second signature. And you're going to pull. And then you're going to go out through this next hole to the outside of the spine. And here is where things change. You hold tight your two signatures together, and you are going to thread your needle through this string right here, this thread. You're going to pull it underneath that, There you go. And when you bring your needle back, you're going to go between the next two holes underneath this thread. You're going to draw that through and it'll form a little V there. It's attaching, it's hooked those threads to attach the first signature to the second signature. And then we draw our needle down through that very same hole that you had come out of. Same hole, drawing it back through, and you go on to the next. We'll go out this hole. We've got our line. Turn it around. Needle goes under this thread, through, pull taut, and back towards you underneath the next thread. Pull taut. It's connected. And we go back down through that same hole that we had come out of just a moment before. Coming out the same hole. And then we move on again. Last hole, you're going to go from the inside to the outside and pull, and you will then go under this thread and pull tight, and now it's time to attach your third signature. Again, you want to line up the holes, kind of keeping a thought on what's the top and the bottom of your book so they lined up pretty well. See, I think I have that one a little wrong, so I'm going to switch it. That's better. That's more even. And you'll feed your needle through this first hole down into the inside of the signature. Just like attaching the other one. And there's going to be a little difference then in just a minute. Back up through the next hole to the outside. And you want to keep your string, your thread, pretty taut, but don't pull it so tight that it breaks. But you do need it to be a little bit tight. If you're a knitter, you understand that tension sometimes takes a lot of practice. The same with bookbinding. It takes some practice to get your tension just right. If it's too tight, you won't be able to fit your needle through. If it's too loose, you'll have gaps when you're finished. To attach the third and all the rest that are to come, signatures, you're doing a little bit the same thing that you did here by going under both threads. But if you can see, there's a little V. There's a little V shape that was formed by what we just did. And what you're going to do is you're going to send your needle underneath that V. And this can be tricky. And this can sometimes tear your paper a little bit. But I don't tend to mind because I think that every book is unique and every little imperfection is just part of the character of an individual book. So if you can see that there, the needle has gone underneath both of those threads, that little V formation of thread. And you're going to pull it through, and that is the connecting stitch. Now, we go down through that same hole, much like we did in the previous attachment of signatures of the first and second. I'm going out through that very same hole. And then through the next, to the outside. Feeding our needle under that V. Sometimes you have to kind of lever it down a little bit and push it with your finger. As long as we're getting through that V. There we go. Once once you have completed the 3 signatures put together, any other ones that you do are going to be attached the exact same way that the 3rd one was, by taking your signature, lining up the holes, making sure they're right, just like that, and then sewing them in the same way. Hopefully you've come out on the outside of the spine. You line up your 4th signature alongside the 3rd that you just attached, and you're going to draw your needle down again through that first hole and through to the inside. And that gives you one little attachment string. Okay? Now, the very top line of the attaching is not going to be as strong as the middles because it's not attached in the same way. It doesn't have that V to go through. So your next step of that is to go through the next hole down from the inside to the outside. And then you'll have that V by which you will attach. So you'll thread your needle through that V, and the more signatures that you attach, the harder this gets. When the time comes that you've run out of thread, you can be mindful of where you're going to tie off and put your knot. I don't mind having knots on the outside. I think it looks kind of cute. But if you would like to leave your knots on the inside and be more hidden, you just tie off wherever you are. I'm about 1/3 of the way down here in this signature attachment, and I'm making a nice thick knot here so that it doesn't pull through anything. Nice thick knot. Okay? And then I'm just going to snip it off and rethread. I actually have a rethreaded needle right here. How convenient. You can just draw your needle through down where you tied off that knot. You can just draw your needle from the outside to the inside, right over or through that knot. See, I'm coming out right where that knot is. Okay? So now I have a knot on the inside and I have a knot on the outside, but I'm going to have no gaps. If you don't want to have any knots on the outside, you can, in the same hole where you've knotted off, you can just draw your needle up through there, where there is your knot. Then you have another knot and you can trim that little tail. And you'll just do the same stitch again. Nothing will be, it won't be very visible. It'll be double secure. And you won't have any knots on the outside if you prefer not to have any on the outside. So those are 2 different ways to continue on when you've run out of thread. Once you've gotten the hang of attaching in the way of going under the V's, as you did with the 3rd and all subsequent signatures, you can put as many signatures as you want onto your book. You can make it very thick, you can stop at 1, you can stop at 2 or 3. I like the look of a 5 signature book. I just think it's a nice looking size, but you can make it as thick or as thin as you want to do. All the rest of the signatures will be attached in the exact same way as the 3rd. Going under the V, coming back through the same hole, and moving on to the next. To end your book when it's time to be finished, it's very simple. Wherever you are, wherever you come out on the end and you think, okay, that's enough, you tie a knot, a nice thick knot, and that's the end. If you don't want to have a knot on the outside, again, you can just do that stitch again and go through and knot off on the inside, and it's fine. Next step is covering, so that's what we'll cover next.